So thank you, Cemal, for joining us. He has a company called Change Please. It helps homeless people become baristas and it provides them with a home. Now, Richard Branson named it his startup of the year and it was rated the best social enterprise in the world in 2018. He was also rated, get this, the 46th coolest person in the world. Wow. Okay. So
where did you find that? Was that by you, Maureen?
We do our research. Yeah. So the pandemic was really tough, as you know, for everybody. And for Change Please, it reduced their staff to 72, from 72 to 12. But the good news is it's now back up to 370. So please, let's give a little clap and a wave. Cemal, thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's so lovely to be here. I'm going to share my story in a second, but yeah, Happy was... Well, actually, Maureen, can I have access to share my screen if possible?
Sure.
Yeah, so Happy was... Well, I'd say Happy, but Henry was a key part to my motivation to becoming a social entrepreneur, which I'll explain a little bit about in a second. I realized I had a picture of a turtle floating behind me, so I've just gone back to a plain white background. There you go. I hear it. Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, sound. Right. So I want to speak generally about disruption and why disruption for us is so vitally important. To start with, my personal background was that my parents were refugees. They came over in 1976 from Cyprus, and they sacrificed everything for me and my sister to go to a good school. And then in my kind of mid-20s to late 20s, I was a commodity broker. I had a bit of I was just about to say a midlife crisis, but actually I just realized if that's midlife at the age of 29, I'm going to be dying at 60. So maybe a third of my life crisis at the age of 29. And on a trip to Vietnam, I was on this 18-hour bus journey and going up from Ho Chi Minh City up to the center of Vietnam. And this American traveler sat next to me on the bus at 2 o'clock in the morning. And he said, look, if you're not happy with your job or your life, you should do the rocking chair test. So that's to imagine sitting in your rocking chair at the age of 90, looking back on your life, thinking, what have you achieved? What's your legacy on the world? Have you left the world in a better place? How are your children going to remember you? And really, what's this whole life thing been about? And for me, I just remember feeling empty, soulless when I was trying to get to sleep, you know, and I went from being exhausted to being bolt awake, just thinking about who I was as an individual. And I remember thinking that if that bus crashed there and then, who would actually care? You know, perhaps some people in my family, hopefully my family, some friends, my bank manager, my insurance broker, but that was it. This whole life thing's been over. And it really made me question who I was as an individual, but what's this whole life thing been about? What's my motives for being alive, really? And it was a huge issue. And then a couple of weeks later, I went to this silent tea house in a place called Hoi An in Vietnam, which is this really stunning tea house that was set up by these ladies that were both deaf and mute, or some were deaf, some were mute. And they came together, created this beautiful space. And the only rule in the space was that you had to be silent. And you had to order your tea and etc. through sign language. So I had the idea to set up Change Please. That was the 23rd of April, 2014. I came back to London. I went on a course called the School of Social Entrepreneurs and met Henry, which was a huge motivating force for me. His energy, his way of seeing things differently. I came from a corporate world, so the philosophy of happy and the way you can have a really happy workplace generally, apart from the one that I was accustomed to working in a commodity firm, which was completely different and definitely not happy, really kind of inspired me to go down this route of social enterprise. And I set up Change Please, which essentially tackles homelessness through coffee. And here's a quick little video that just explains a bit more about us.
There are many problems in the world that feel almost impossible to solve, but homelessness is not one of them. Even though it is an issue faced by all major cities in the world, Change Please provides a solution different to that offered by governments by delivering an employment-first model. We are a life-changing organisation where 100% of Change Please profits from selling our coffee supports people experiencing homelessness with a living wage job in the coffee industry, housing in just 10 days, training, mental health therapy, and a fresh shot at life. And we've proven this works with an 82% success rate. We launched with a single cart in Covent Garden in London, and we have grown across the UK and internationally into a total of 8 countries. We now supply coffee to banks, law firms, hospitals, gyms, supermarkets, universities, train networks, airlines, and we will soon be in space. All while serving our 5-time Great Taste award-winning coffees. This is not just coffee. This is life-changing coffee.
They've done more for me in a year and a half than the whole government has done in 12 and a half years.
A stepping stone out of the darkness, really. It's a star. It's like a star to me, so hopefully I can cling on to it.
And news of our work has spread around the world. We were named the world's best social enterprise in 2018, and we've won many other awards. We've also just launched our own bakery school, supporting people who are homeless with new skills. We find, support, and train people experiencing homelessness who have amazing abilities. All they need is the opportunity and support to become great employees.
I've never known a company that would bend over backwards to see that their employees have everything they need and that they're happy.
Social enterprise is a win-win solution. If you're going to buy a product anyway, then why not do good at the same time? By choosing social enterprises, consumers and corporates are voting with their money to make the world a better place.
Homelessness is a problem that we can all solve. This is a movement, a model that goes beyond coffee and homelessness. This is the future.
It takes us all to figure out how we can apply ourselves to solve the world's problems.
Our model works, but we can't do this alone. We need your help to keep more people off the streets. We are changing the world by doing business better. And it proves that if you want to change the world, you just have to change where you buy your coffee.
And all of that in 5 years, I think, really stemmed from those, the School of Social Entrepreneurs and what we learned in those moments and those meetings with Henry, which is really exciting. And I think my first nickable idea is just feeling comfortable to make mistakes. During the journey, right at the beginning, I wanted to make everything perfect, and I didn't want to start until we knew everything, and I realized I actually didn't know anything at all. Our model initially just started with providing jobs, and then we realized we had to provide housing, and then we realized actually the most important part of what we should be offering is therapy support. No matter how quickly you give somebody a job and a house, if you're not tackling that root cause of that pain and that trauma of why they became homeless in the first place, whether it's being a victim of domestic abuse, sexual abuse, going through a divorce, a bereavement, being an ex-offender, a military veteran, you're not tackling the problem. And I never knew any of those points. And for me, now we encourage all of our staff to make mistakes, to feel comfortable if they make a mistake, but also to seek out criticism. So, for example, rather than just asking a customer, was everything okay? We now ask them, what one thing would you change about your experience, and really seek out negativity, seek out problems. And that kind of stands true to also our model as well. So we purchase coffee from sustainable farms. Coffee's then roasted by people who are homeless, and everything from now, our coffee is now carbon neutral, to plastic-free packaging, to our cups are made from aqueous lines so they can go into bins. All of this is through our staff asking those difficult questions and trying to seek out criticism from our customers as well. So yes, it's worked in a lot of corporate locations. Again, a bit of echo or feedback if someone's
Oh, you're muted, Cemal.
I think somebody muted me. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, we supply coffee onto a whole range of organisations, and what's really amazing is their desire to want to make a difference as well, and their openness to be willing to learn about social business and to kind of make a difference in their workplaces. Last night I was in a conference with doing a talk for CBRE, and one of the biggest challenges was, how do we start on the social enterprise journey? And one thing that we tell everybody is it has to be a journey. It has to be you have to take the plunge from somewhere. And I think that's part of that entrepreneurial mindset, which we really promote at Change Please. So for me, this slide really represents the power of social business and getting our clients to think differently. So this is obviously Delta Airlines. They've got 880 planes around the world. They use a huge coffee company. We met them and we said, rather than talking to you about our coffee, we took them on a walk around Atlanta to show them the real problem about homelessness. And what we explained to them was, by moving their coffee over to Change Please, it would reduce the cost of their coffee by 11%. It would, Condé Nast said the coffee we had on Virgin Atlantic was the best coffee on any airline. But we could reduce homelessness in Atlanta by 75% for women and children who, in 5 years, in a state where it's the second worst state for children who are at risk of homelessness. And that walk around Atlanta to see the problem, to see the challenges, and take them on our journey with us, the head of procurement said it was the most disruptive, innovative way that they've ever seen a tender. So for us, disruption, the way we do things differently at Change Please, is really at the heart of everything that we do. Most governments around the world tackle the problem of homelessness through trying to build housing. They're not building housing quick enough. Housing is still doesn't it might tackle the problem temporarily of homelessness, but you're not developing society connectedness and a community feel, and it's just temporary, and that person's always reliant on somebody else. We tackle the problem through jobs, as I said before. So everything that we've done today is all been about disruption, and you see that in the second part of what I speak about. What I would like everybody to do in this first bit is just to ask people for the first breakout for the next 5 minutes, a question of, can you think about you at the age of 90 and do your own rocking chair test, to think about what's this whole life thing been about? I often think to myself personally that my social construct and my values as an individual have been based around the period of time that I, being born in the 80s and my parents being refugees, and my value system being about making money and success. If I was born 1,000 years before, if I was born in the Amazon rainforest in a tribe, for example, how would my value system be different? We're still all humans, but what we are born into kind of affects the way we see the world. And I really believe that we need some time to stop and think about really what's this whole life thing been about. It's a little bit deep, that part, for 5 minutes, but really just on a basic level, what's our rocking chair test? And we ask all of the staff that join us at Change Please to do the same thing. So not the full 370 people yet, but the initial 72 have done that at least. And one of the key reasons that we ask people to do that is the journey that we bring people on with us isn't easy. There's a lot of disruptions. We do things differently, but so there's going to be a lot of hard moments along the way. So to really understand what's your motive for going along your own personal journey really helps you to develop roots that keep you strong during those difficult moments. And that's why we feel it's so important for all of our staff to do that when they first join our company. Is that okay for a quick, for 5 minutes breakout?
That is grand, Cemal. It's so the rocking chair test. At the age of 90, what would you think about your life?
Thanks, Henry. And thank you all thank you for people who wrote lovely messages in the chat. It's so kind of you. It's really made my heart warm. So the beginning of COVID last year, or whenever, COVID, a couple of years ago, all of our sites closed. We had just taken on a new cohort of trainees, beneficiaries that we had a responsibility and a duty of care to support, even though we weren't able to receive any money for, none of our sites were open, so we couldn't actually get any money in from their working. So it really broke our model. But we just thought we would do the right thing because we had some coffee vans which were randomly quite close to a lot of the Nightingale hospitals. So we set up outside all the Nightingale hospitals across the UK, from London, Manchester, Cardiff, and we provided free coffee to doctors and nurses 24 hours a day, so they could come out in a time where everybody loved and clapped and cared for the NHS, even you know, in really, really wonderful moment in our kind of recent history. And the NHS were really grateful. The Natalie, who was at the time the COO, she came and said, look, this is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. So kind of you. This might not be relevant at all, but there's actually a coffee tender going on at the moment. You've probably got no chance in winning it or being attributed. There's hundreds and hundreds of companies that tender for it, but just apply and see what happens. And maybe in, like, you know, 8, 9, 10 years time, when you're a bit bigger, then you'll have a chance. So we applied, and we won, which was pretty insane. And that was a £4 million contract across 2 years, 8 million over 4 years. And we kind of took from that, just choose love, you know, really just taking every decision that we can, when we can make, and we're at kind of crossroads and we don't know which way to go, we just choose the love direction and do the right thing. That even if it's sometimes not commercially viable and it's not pragmatic from a business perspective, we choose the right direction. I know it sounds obvious, but it was a really powerful story for a lot of our team to kind of take away, and they apply that now and in their personal life and in work life, and it really is one of our big nickable things that we should be obvious, but it sometimes isn't when you work in business. And going back to the theme of disruption, so one of the big challenges around our business model and also homelessness generally is really trying to get vital services to rough sleepers. There's services that are available in big cities around the world, but they're so disparate. And we decided we wanted to do something about it. We during the worst time you should ever buy buses, which is in the height of COVID, where Transport for London were buying every bus you could see, we decided to buy 3 buses of our own and transform them into providing vital services for rough sleepers. So everything from showers, haircuts, clothes washing, new clothes. One of the buses you can open a bank account on both. All the buses you can have access directly to a doctor for a virtual consultation. And a couple of weeks ago, we had a lady who had a lump on her breast and she'd done nothing about it, and we got her an emergency access to a doctor. On another bus, we've got a state-of-the-art dental surgery. 40% of people who are homeless complain about pain in their mouth, and 15% of rough sleepers have tried to pull out their own teeth out of sheer pain. And we've put all these services on these buses, and we have them now in London, opening them in Manchester, and it's never been done anywhere in the world. And it really is, when we were receiving all this press and kind of attention for it, the key word that people were speaking about was being disruptive, thinking outside the box, doing things that were different, trying to break the status quo of how these services are being provided. And it really represented the values of the people that work for us, and really trying to tackle the problems differently. And something perhaps a little bit confidential, but I'm sharing it with 108 people, is middle of next year, we're launching a cruise ship as well, which is going to be providing everything from housing to mental health support, rehab, on the Thames, in partnership with 2 councils that are going to be providing, again, vital services for rough sleepers, which in this case also include temporary to permanent accommodation. So again, this has never been done anywhere in the world. And since we've been working with a couple of mayors on the projects, we've then led to a discussion with the mayor of LA as well, which we're now in discussions with. So really taking those disruptive ideas and trying to think outside the box and do things differently is something that we take really at heart here at Change Please. And this is my son. He's called Sonny, and he's my inspiration. He had a very difficult birth. Shouldn't be able to walk, shouldn't be able to eat and do things by himself. And he's literally a walking miracle, as said by a neurologist and a range of doctors. I sometimes take that for granted. He jumps in my car, hits every button you can imagine, flicks loads of switches, and I get frustrated with him. And I then sit in the seat and I'm like, I never knew the car could do this. This is like phenomenal. He then jumps on my laptop and then he hits every single button, and I'm like, on my iPad, I'm just like, wow. this is new functions that I never knew existed on my laptop. But I still get frustrated with them at the time. And it's really just taught me so much, you know, about patience, about being comfortable for things to be broken, and seeing what happens, seeing what comes on the back of that, and letting patience be part of that journey for me personally. And that's something that I share with all of our staff. Going back to that first point that I made around asking people what one thing would they like to change about what we offer, and he's just a representation for that, and I wanted to share that story. And then another story is somebody that we've supported who is also an amazing person. His name's Adan. Adan used to be an executive chef in New York. He studied at the Kemp's College, which is basically the Harvard of culinary education in the US. It's the best place you can study to be a chef. He moved to the UK with his family in 2007-8, and unfortunately in 2009 he lost his wife and his daughter in an accident. He then lost his job, he lost his home, he lost everything that he came to the UK for, and he ended up homeless around Borough Market. And then yeah, it was a really sad story. He was depressed, he was suicidal. And then at the end of 2010 in November, he was walking past Blackfriars Bridge. It was a freezing cold night, icy waters in the Thames. I think there was about 3 to 4 mils of sheets of ice in the Thames at the time in that November. And as he was walking past the entrance of Blackfriars Bridge, he heard a scream from behind him, and he looked around and he saw a lady jumping into the Thames. Her name was Amy, jumping into the Thames, into this icy water, trying to commit suicide. And Adan, who lost everything, he ran to where she had jumped off when everyone else was looking over, calling 999, not knowing what to do. He took off his clothes, he jumped in after her, and he ended up saving her life. And it made every major kind of national, international news story. You can imagine at the time in 2010, he became a mini national celebrity. He ended up winning the George Award for Bravery from the Queen, which is the highest civilian award that anybody can win. He also won the High Commendation from Prince Charles at Buckingham Palace. And the High Commendation had not been given to anybody in 43 years before him, and they gave it to him. And in 2012, yeah, I mean, he still is, but he was literally a national hero. And from 2012 to 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, he said to me that as soon as that press had died down and he went back to the streets, people forgot about him, and they put the same labels that they would put on anyone else that was homeless and on the streets as being a drug addict, having mental health issues, having alcohol dependency. And the truth of it is that he's literally a national hero. That should be the label that should have been put on him. But people forgot that, and we put him in a box. I must have walked past him many times. We've got sites around Borough Market, and it's easy to put labels and put people into boxes and have unconscious bias and stereotypes. And he joined us, and we literally couldn't find anybody else that was as good as him to train people, because his ability to taste sweetness, bitterness, acidity in coffee is vital to be an amazing barista. And then he went on to train our other homeless staff to also be baristas as well. And here's a quick little video from BBC Comic Relief, which just tells his story about Dan.
So Dan, tell me about your past. I hear you've had quite a rough time there.
Yeah, I mean, where we are right now, this was my bedroom. This is where I used to sleep.
Just here? You slept
right
here?
Right here, yes. Yeah, a good 10 years I slept here, so this is my safe haven, basically. So
why here?
Because of the heat, yeah. Especially when I came to London, and I ended up here, right in this very spot. I've had people try to urinate on me. I've had set fire to me, throw bottles at me. I think the worst though is just the loneliness, the starvation, the hunger, constant hunger.
We firmly believe that everyone should be allowed another go. And actually sometimes you get into a position, we've all been in places where actually we're a bit stuck. Things that seem simple to a lot of people, like just talking to people across a coffee counter, can be a challenge. How has Change Please changed you?
Wow, I mean, I'm still rebuilding my life, but without Change Please, how can I support? They've done more for me in a year and a half than the whole government has done in 12 and a half years. They took me off the streets, they put me into a place, they gave me clean clothes, they gave me some dignity, and I'm looking forward to getting back to becoming a chef because that's my trade. Yeah. But I would never be able to do that if I didn't have the support from Change Please. So
maybe you should come work for me.
I'd love to, maybe one day, give you a formal day.
And that was Theo Randall, who's a Michelin star chef, and he could afford him, which was wonderful. And it brings me on to my next kind of like nickable ideas. And based on that story around Adan, labels, preconceptions, unconscious bias, we did an internal kind of review on our kind of unconscious bias at Change Please and what we do. And even a company that's attracting, you know, amazing socially minded and curious people, we found that we still had a lot of unconscious bias in our teams. And we started to question those. And one of the things that we did was that we sent a range of CVs out to, we were in 8 countries, to all the managers and with a job description, a job role. And we said, you know, which of these CVs do you think would be most suitable for these job roles? And what's the reasons why? And what was so interesting was the local unconscious bias and stereotyping that really came along with that, and why they were choosing certain individuals and why they weren't, and everything in some cases from something as simple to cultural bias, gender bias, to physical expectations of an ability to do a job. And that's something that really made us question us as an organization and as individuals. We found it on an international basis. We also found it regionally in the UK, which is really interesting. I then questioned my own biases, and I really found that I had an issue with authority bias, or our company had an issue with authority bias, which means that for me to, when I make a statement, or and it's actually quite difficult being a CEO, and sorry, a founder, CEO, and an entrepreneur, where you feel like you have to lead everything. And Henry's going to kick me when I say what I'm about to say, but you feel like you have to lead from the front and come up with all the ideas and have that responsibility and shoulder all that burden, that you try to kind of dictate the route that people that the company goes in. And I know that's completely the wrong thing, and it's not the happy way, but it's just my natural inclination. And people were listening to what I was saying because I was saying it, and that really is a bad case of authority bias. And I really started to do things like, you know, be the last person to speak, to realize that my ideas were to ask questions rather than give advice. And I really questioned a lot of the things and the biases that came naturally in our organization. So my breakout question, this might be a bit difficult for 5 minutes, and I know I shouldn't have 2 questions, but I know the first part might be a bit difficult for 5 minutes. But my first question is, you know, can you think of any biases, preconceptions, labels in society, either in work or outside of work, that you've noticed but also overlooked? It's difficult, I find, when we have some social norms or values that we've been told are acceptable in some instances. You know, we've seen it recently in the police in Charing Cross, that we overlook them and we say they're acceptable, that perhaps we haven't questioned or wanted to question, and we want to change. And maybe that's a kind of a bit deeper question for 5 minutes, but maybe it's a starting point for the first 5 minutes. Or going back to Sunny, is there anything that you want to break in your workplace and rebuild? That's probably a bit easier to answer in 5 minutes. But that's my second part question.
What kind of team structure do you have under you? Is the first question.
Yeah, so we've got a managing director in each country. They then report to me and another co-CEO. And then what we try to do is, I know it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but have as flat a structure as possible, where people are on as similar wages as each other, or there's no more than 2.5 times the highest wage to the lowest wage. And it's and then we've got head of retail teams, we've got head of impact. I try to keep the impact and the commercial sides separate, so you get a clear focus on both of those key areas. And we, you know, when we're competing against Costas and Starbucks and all the big coffee chains around the world, you know, you need to have that commercial competitiveness, you know, at the forefront of your mindset. And when you start to mix in a bit of the impact into it, it kind of waters down. I found anyway, it tends to water down a little bit of your your edge. So what our commercials teams do is generate the income, generate the surplus, and then that surplus is given to the impact teams to then manage and reinvest into impact.
Excellent. Next question. How do you continue to innovate and get these amazing new ideas?
3 o'clock in the morning, just don't fight, try to get back to sleep is my somehow just they come in the morning. To me personally, I have these brainwaves in the morning, but what we try to do at the end of pretty much every meeting that we have is encourage our teams to come up with and it's not general ideas for the company. It's asking that question at the end of that meeting, like, how can we do this differently? And just welcoming that disruption, welcoming that that challenge. And I just, I really find it's difficult sometimes for people to feel uncomfortable communicating feeling uncomfortable to say, like, I really think we should go in this direction. And so we try to welcome it as much as possible. And also asking our teams, what one thing could you change? I think that's so vitally important, because you're openly inviting criticism and opening ourselves up for change.
Excellent. And next question. What is your top tip for helping people unlearn hierarchy? It sounds like that was something that you had to unlearn. What was your top tip for that?
I mean, it wasn't difficult for me to unlearn hierarchies because it was quite a traumatic, painful experience that we were all involved in. And there was just one charge on making money at all costs. And for me, it was the first thing I wanted to do at Change Please was make it. And I know this is a happy conference, but make it a happy place to work. And actually, I get as much enjoyment, or actually more enjoyment, from seeing the people in our teams grow and develop and be happy than I see from the company grow, and also our trainees and our beneficiaries. So for me, it's really about inviting as many people from all parts of the organization to be welcome to share their opinions and their views. But also on our board, we've got people who are formerly our trainees and now they're our mentors, and they help to kind of share lived experience of how Change Please operates and how we can improve for the better.
Brilliant, brilliant. And what's your ambition for how far you can go with Change Please?
That is the hardest question, because for me personally, because I never expected us to get to where we've got to in 5 years, and the opportunities that come to mind. I'm just super excited about what's possible, and some of the crazy. I mean, we're going to end homelessness in Skid Row. We are in Los Angeles. We are currently one of the fastest growing coffee companies in the world. These crazy ideas start off crazy, like the buses, like the cruise ships, and we put them out on the table, and our team finds a way to deliver them. And I think my goal is to put these crazy ideas on the table for our teams, and then and just say, how do we do this? Not for me, it's not whether we should do it or not. It's just like, how do we do it? And we just spend the time brainstorming, breaking down the status quo, and just trying to find a solution to the problems. And for me, that's the most exciting part. We don't have problems. So I said solution to problems. That would go. That's £5 in the swear jar. Solution to our challenges, to the challenges of that idea. And that for me is what's super exciting. We've got people who are so motivated to try and find the solutions to things that we just think anything's possible. And that's what's exciting. So yeah.
And do you have a swear jar if people say problem? Is that real?
Yeah, £5. It used to be £1, and it became 2, then we put up to 5.
And how often do people put money in?
Now it's become a virtual. There's a link to a virtual swear jar. So we just send the link to somebody, and then they donate the £5 through, because there's so much through Teams that we do now that we just send the link out, and then they put the money in for the debit card. So yeah, very often, Henry.
Okay.
I've even got my parents doing it. Sorry.
Have you really?
Yeah.
How do you avoid burnout? How do you prioritize and keep the main thing the main thing?
So for me, it is such a difficult issue. Sonny is he's been a bit of a circuit breaker for me to be able, especially after what he went through his birth, and reading so much around the importance of parenthood and fatherhood, and as your child is growing, has really forced me to take time off and to really be mindful in the times that I'm spending with him. And that really has been one of the only ways that I've been able to switch off. I'm one of those people that's kind of all or nothing. When I'm switch off, I just completely switch off, which actually never happens. But when I'm all in, I'm all in. And Sunny really allows me to kind of force myself to do it. There's a really amazing, I did that talk I was at the other night. I was chatting to a really wonderful lady called Cecilia from Babies from Love. And you might know her, I'm sure. But she told me that her way of switching off now has been to do a circuit breaker of 6 weeks, where she's just going cold turkey as the CEO, as the founder of the company, and just starting and just seeing how the business survives without her.
All right.
And that's really interesting. I don't know how I would do it. I also
Could you do that? Could you do that?
Well, it's probably the same feeling that I say to some of the beneficiaries we have that are currently taking our own heroin, and we say, right, you need to come off it. We're going to support you methadone. It's probably the same fear that they have that I have. And I don't think I can do it for 6 weeks, but I'm going to try for 2, and then build my way up to 6 weeks. But do you know what? I still have a huge level of motivation. It's a problem that I have as a founder, where I carry too much of everyone else's problems still, and it goes back to the authority bias that I mentioned previously. But it's something that I'm really learning to do, and really trying to just hand over more and have a bit more. And by the way, what I'm saying shouldn't be because we've been successful as an organization that what I'm doing is the right thing. What Happy teaches is absolutely the right thing. It's just the way that I've switched off, perhaps doing the right thing as a way of moving quickly, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And what I need to do as a next step is be a better leader, to restructure the organization. So sometimes it's easy to kind of look at organizations and say, and they've grown quickly, they've done well, and try to replicate what their leaders have done. But this is a perfect example of not doing that, because I really think that you can compromise doing the right thing sometimes to grow super quickly. And that's what I've done as a leader. And that's the next stage of my journey, to really try and improve myself as a leader as well. And just, sorry, a last thing on that point. There is a huge amount of support for entrepreneurs starting.
Yeah.
There isn't, and that entrepreneur, that founder, then gets propelled to becoming a CEO. And in the public world, I know Happy is slightly different, but in the public world, there isn't that much support for that journey to go from being an entrepreneur to a CEO. And I think there's that big knowledge gap there, and that's something that I've had to learn the hard way, and I still have a long way to go. But
you need to come on our level 7 senior leader.
Okay, I'm in. Yeah, but that's been my biggest challenges, and that's, I think, the next journey. That's the thing that's going to limit our growth, I think.
Right. Okay. I could talk to you endlessly, but I think we need to take a break. That has been an amazing story. Can everybody unmute and give a big round of applause on that? That was an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to leave it. Have a lovely day. Enjoy the conference.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.